rent-day shock. He heard a cute twin kids whisper, "I'm hungry." His life changed forever. The polished chrome of a newly unveiled sedan gleamed under the showroom lights. Arthur Hayes, impeccable in a bespoke suit, adjusted his tie. He owned Apex Motors, a chain of luxury car dealerships, and commanded every inch of its sterile, opulent space. His gaze swept over the meticulously arranged vehicles, then hardened as it settled on the distant staff entrance, a grimy, forgotten corner, a stark contrast to the grandeur he cultivated. It was there, near the overflowing bins and peeling paint, that he sometimes saw them. Two small shadows, flitting like forgotten ghosts. Lily woke first, not to an alarm, but to the familiar hushed rumble of the early morning delivery trucks shaking the concrete floors of Apex Motors. She nudged Leo. Their thin mattress, a makeshift bed of old service blankets behind stacks of forgotten tire rims in a rarely used storage closet, offered little comfort. A sharp, echoing clang from the service bay next door, as if someone had dropped a heavy tool, made them both flinch. "Get up, Leo," Lily whispered, her voice a reedy rasp. "Bethany will be here soon. We need to look busy." Leo groggily sat up, pulling a too large, stained mechanic's shirt over his small frame. His eyes weren't wide open, not because he was still sleepy, but because they had learned to avoid all direct light. Even the first harsh fluorescent glow from the distant showroom filtering through the storage room's vents. Their workspace was a dented, overturned oil drum serving as a table. On it lay a few bent paper clips and some discarded bolts they'd organized. A few crumpled napkins, left over from a staff lunch, were the only things they had to try, and wipe the grime from their perpetually smudged hands. A curt, echoing voice, sharp as a whip, cut through the cavernous service bay. "You two, still lingering? There's a delivery coming. Make yourselves scarce." Bethany Croft, regional manager, Arthur's half-sister, appeared in the doorway, her tailored suit crisp, her smile a thin, unforgiving line. She placed a chipped plastic plate on the oil drum, containing some cold, congealed pasta and a piece of dried-out chicken, mangled and full of bones. She didn't say anything more, just pushed it hard, causing the plate to hit the edge of the drum, almost falling to the floor. "Eat quickly, and if you're still underfoot when Mr. Hayes arrives, don't blame me." Then she disappeared as if Lily and Leo were air, existing but not something anyone was obliged to notice. Lily picked up a fork, scooping up a little pasta. The taste was cold and as salty as tears, but she didn't cry. It had been a long time since tears had appeared. Perhaps their small bodies had learned to conserve everything, both energy and emotion. After breakfast, they continued to sit, pretending to examine the bolts, each quiet movement an extreme act of caution. They knew Bethany's punishment for carelessness. Mid-morning, Lily stood up and walked to a high, grimy window pane in the storage room. The room had no clock, but they always estimated the time by the sounds outside. The distant buzz of traffic, the sharp ping of a car alarm, the voices of children calling to each other from the street that bordered the dealership's back lot. Today, too, outside, children in bright uniforms with backpacks laughed brightly under the radiant sunlight. Lily rested her forehead against the cool, dusty window pane, one cheek marked with peeling paint. She didn't dream of anything big, just thought of a colored pencil, a book with a picture of a kitten, or a name tag to wear on her chest. Bethany had said they weren't smart enough to go to school. "School is for children who know how to obey, not for strays," she'd snapped once. Lily didn't dare ask again. Suddenly, a loud crash from the next bay. A stack of empty oil cans tumbled. Lily frantically tried to catch them, but it was too late. The noise echoed. Footsteps sounded faster than usual. The storage room door burst open and Bethany's voice ripped through the air. "Messed up again. How many times have I told you to?" She snatched an old rag Leo was holding, held it up. As if examining it, then said nothing more. Her hand, holding a heavy-duty wrench she always kept near her desk, swung up. A whizzing sound, then a dull thud as it struck Leo's arm. He flinched, but the second blow hit his shoulder. The third, Lily's upper arm, causing her to drop the few bent paper clips she was holding. They didn't scream or plead. They just bowed their heads, their small hands clenching the edge of their shirts. The only sounds in the room were their gasping breaths and the wrench striking the metal floor as Bethany left. They sat there for a while, their limbs numb. The wrench had fallen somewhere, but they didn't dare look for it. Their back burned, but there was no one to wipe it, no clean water to wash it. Lily went to a utility sink, turned on the tap. The dripping water seemed to mock them. An old puddle spread across the tiled floor, full of a moldy smell. Lily took an old towel, wet it lightly, and used her trembling hands to clean Leo's wound, then her own. Outside, Bethany was on a video call in her opulent office. The screen flickered, the changing light constantly reflecting on the wall. A lively stock market report echoed with the booming voices of analysts. That laughter sent a chill down Lily's spine. Not because of the volume, but because it was so far away. For them, loud, unburdened laughter no longer belonged to human beings. Night fell. After a cold dinner of a few hard pieces of bread, they, found in a discarded catering box, Lily and Leo sat silently on their makeshift bed. They no longer had the strength to move, but didn't dare lie down to sleep. The dim, yellow security light reflected on the wall, casting the shadows of two thin children and a rickety stack of tire rims. In a hidden corner, tucked behind an old air filter, were a few scraps of polished microfiber cloth that Bethany hadn't noticed. Lily had secretly picked them up from previous detailing sessions, hiding them carefully in an old pocket. Tonight, Lily decided to do something she had been thinking about for months. A small car, not to play with, but to have something to be with. The fabric was carefully folded. She used a loose thread from Leo's shirt to sew gentle curves, creating a simple shape, a rounded chassis, two tiny wheels. She didn't know how to draw a face, so she left it blank like themselves. She sewed each stitch with her left hand because her right hand was bruised. The wind blew through a crack in the service bay door, flipping over last month's unpaid utility bill. Lily saw the number but didn't know if it was big or small. She had never learned how to read bills. She only knew that when that number appeared, Bethany would be angry again. Lily carefully cut a strand of blue thread. The only one left in an old discarded cleaning kit to make trim for the fabric car. The blue was like the sky she had never stood under for more than 10 minutes. She placed the little fabric car next to their shared pillow. She looked at it for a long time, then whispered, "Tomorrow, I'll add lights." Her voice was as soft as a breath. Outside the storage closet, the wind blew gently, but their space didn't have a real window, just a piece of frosted glass fixed in place, impossible to open. No one heard Lily's words. No one knew that tonight was the first time she had spoken to anyone after many weeks of only silence. She closed her eyes. Beside her, the nameless fabric car lay on its side, looking up at the ceiling as if waiting for a dream. Lily didn't cry, not because she was strong, but because she had forgotten how to shed tears. The April sun in the city wasn't fierce, but it was persistent, like the sun itself was tired of shining down on this place. Arthur Hayes sat in his sleek black company sedan, stopped in front of Apex Motors. The rough gray walls of the adjacent old auto repair shop next door, its windows taped shut, the rusty, mottled tin roof, all created a picture that was both familiar and forgettable. "We could tear it all down and rebuild," his young marketing director, fresh out of business school, suggested. "There's nothing to keep." Arthur didn't answer immediately. He quietly got out of the car, holding a tablet, His eyes swept from the dry, overgrown weeds near the old shop to the moss growing on the base of its crumbling walls. He looked around, then gently shook his head. Number A's dilapidated as it is. This is still a refuge for many people in difficult circumstances, he said, his voice steady. We still need to calculate carefully. The young director hesitated. Arthur didn't need to hear more. For him, this wasn't just a property inspection. It was confronting an old failure, a promise he had broken 5 years ago. He had sponsored a small community garage for disadvantaged mechanics, hoping to bring about a new beginning. But only 6 months later, the roof collapsed due to poor quality materials, and a young apprentice was seriously injured. The construction company took the blame. The supervisor was fired, but that loss, although not directly his, still made him never fully trust the system again. Since then, each year, he personally selected a few locations from hundreds of properties, coming to inspect them without warning. He didn't believe in reports. He only believed in what he saw, and no one could see for him. This old repair shop belonged to a small trust he had set up years ago for orphaned children of former auto workers. On paper, everything was normal. Rent collected regularly, no tenant complaints, technical reports saying satisfactory. But when Arthur stepped into the alleyway between his pristine dealership and the decaying shop, he felt something different. Not exactly a sound, but a feeling that someone was watching, but not strong enough to call out. He slowed down as he approached the back door of the old shop. The wooden door was old and peeling, no nameplate, no sound. The windows were covered with coarse cloth from the inside, making it impossible to see clearly. But what made Arthur stop wasn't the old appearance, but the excessive silence. While the other units on the block had radios, fans, cooking sounds, children's footsteps, this place seemed cut off from the rest of the world. Is this room still occupied? He asked the marketing director. Yes, Mr. Hayes. Bethany oversees that particular family trust for orphaned workers' children, the director replied. She handles the weekly stipends. Arthur nodded, saying nothing more. He took a few more steps, about to turn away, when a very small sound rang out, like metal falling to the floor. He turned back. A crack in the grimy curtains moved slightly. Just a little, but enough to make him come closer. He stood right under the window, and then, through the thin, dull gray curtain, he saw a scene that made time seem to freeze. Bethany, tall, thin, with immaculately styled hair, was holding that heavy wrench, striking a little boy who was hunched over on the floor. Each blow hit his back, his shoulders, and even the wooden floor. The girl beside him didn't cry, didn't call out, didn't resist. She just covered her head, curling up like a dried leaf being crushed. But what made Arthur choke wasn't Bethany's actions, but the child's eyes. In a brief moment, when Lily looked up, her eyes staring straight at him, there was no plea for help, no tears, just a look. Tired, hauntingly silent, as if she had seen hundreds of people pass by, but no one really saw her. Arthur stepped back. He didn't know how. He turned and hurried away, leaving the director behind asking something indistinct. Back in his car, he sat silently. His hand rested on the steering wheel, shaking slightly. Throughout the drive home to his penthouse apartment, he didn't say anything. Red lights and green lights, car horns, music from the radio, everything slipped away as if he was sitting underwater. That evening, he didn't go home but stopped by his private office in the dealership. The lights were off. Only the light from the laptop screen reflected on his face, lined with a newfound weariness. He opened the property file for the old garage. The first page was a satellite image. The small square, located between other squares, was nothing special, but he couldn't take his eyes off it. He flipped the page, scrolled down to the list of family trust recipients. Lily and Leo Thompson, receiving weekly stipend from 3 years ago. No further notes. He closed the laptop. All night, Arthur didn't sleep. The girl's icy gaze through. The dusty glass kept appearing in his head, an expression that didn't beg, didn't plead, but therefore struck straight into his conscience. No one looks at a child like that if they have nothing to hide, and no one endures like that if they don't know that no one will come to save them. The next morning, when his personal assistant walked in, Arthur said, his voice hoarse and low, "Start rechecking all guardianship records for the Thompson children. All of them. From the beginning." And from that day, an invisible string between Arthur and that forgotten storage room was tied again. Not because of duty and not because of law, but because for the first time in many years, he realized there are looks powerful enough to stir an entire life. Arthur returned to the dealership 3 days later. No specific plan, no papers in hand, and no one with him. He stopped his car in the same spot, turned off the engine, lowered the car window a bit to hear the sounds of the street, the wind blowing through the iron fence, the barking of dogs echoing from the empty lot, the sound of bicycle wheels rolling on gravel, and the absolute silence from the old garage's back entrance. Like last time, this time he didn't go right up to the window, just stopped across the street. In his hand, he carried a small paper bag. Inside was a crispy sesame seed bread roll, 2 old, worn comic books bought from a liquidation bookstore, and an unsigned letter. He put the paper bag down on the service entrance steps, knocked lightly on the door, and turned away without waiting. He wanted to let the person behind that door choose. Lily opened the door when the sun had gone down, past the roof across the street. She didn't come out, just peeked through the door, looked around, and then bent down to pick up the paper bag as if afraid someone was watching. Her eyes scanned each item inside. The bread roll, the worn comic book covers, the paper wrapping, with a faint smell of strangers but no name, no message. She put everything on the oil drum gently, as if touching a luxury item. The fragrant smell of bread made her stomach growl, but Lily didn't dare eat it right away. She wrapped it in an old cloth, stuffing it under their makeshift bed where she still hid the things she wasn't ready to lose. She flipped through the pages of the comic book. Simple drawings, animals wearing clothes, talking to each other in a gentle language. A fox holding the hand of a rabbit, walking through the forest with a small house where everyone greets each other every morning with a smile. Lily read that, and then stopped. Night fell. Bethany came home late that day after a meeting with investors. She walked in with a bag of ready-made food, put it heavily on the staff break-room table, her eyes glancing around as usual. Then she stopped. The book. She picked it up, flipped through a few pages, then turned to look at Lily and Leo. "Where did this come from?" Lily didn't answer, standing still. "I'm asking you, are you mute?" Still silent. The only answer could bring one thing, a reprimand, so they chose silence, like so many times before. Bethany snatched the book, went straight to the industrial shredder near the service bay, which was still running. She threw the book into the shredder like throwing a piece of trash without hesitation. Lily stood behind the storage closet door, looking through the crack. The shredder whirred, swallowing the image of the rabbit and the fox. The paper tore, twisting, turning into unrecognizable scraps, then falling like dead confetti. She bit her lip, not because she regretted a book, but because she had just lost something she hadn't had time to name. That night, when Bethany was asleep, Lily quietly went to the shredder. She used a small piece of metal to push around the scraps, looking for pieces that hadn't been completely destroyed. 2 pieces of paper were left, warped, torn, but still readable. One of the 2 pieces had only one line: "You deserve to be loved." Lily sat down, her hands trembling as she smoothed out the piece of paper, the dim moonlight shining through. The high window was enough to see the printed words, thin as hair. She repeated that sentence in her head like a forgotten spell. Then she folded it up, stuffing it into the fabric car she had sewn the night before. On the other side of the street, in his car, Arthur witnessed everything. He saw the girl come out, rummaging through the scraps with her bare hands, picking, up the pieces that no one wanted to keep. He didn't hear her voice, but he felt a quiet reverence in every movement. No one picks up scraps if it wasn't once whole. No one keeps a torn piece of paper if the words on it have no meaning to them. Arthur leaned his head against the driver's seat. His hand rested on his chest, where his heart tightened, as if a string was squeezing it. For the first time in many years, he felt afraid. Not afraid of Bethany, not afraid of the corporate system, but afraid that if he didn't do anything, that look would go out, and that child would no longer believe in anyone. The next morning, he returned to the office. No meetings, no reading reports. Then he called solicitor Evelyn Reed, an old corporate lawyer who had once helped him navigate a tricky acquisition. "We need to meet," he said. "This time it's not a lawsuit, but children." And in the small storage room across the street, Lily woke up with a strange feeling. Not relieved, not safe, but something like warmth still lingered on the cold concrete. She took the fabric car, opened the seam, checked the piece of paper. Still there. The words were still there. "You deserve to be loved." No one knew that on that morning, Lily kept her left hand on her chest longer than usual, as if she was checking if her heart still existed. Arthur wasn't a private investigator, and he wasn't a social worker. He didn't have the skill to find clues, and he didn't know how to ask indirectly to extract information. But he had intuition, something he had learned after many years of running businesses where pretense was packaged as a high-end product. And he had one more thing: the time to observe, and the silence for people to voluntarily say things no one asked. After the day he personally witnessed Bethany's cruelty towards Lily and Leo, he started returning to the dealership's backlot more often. He didn't try to approach the children, and he didn't directly confront Bethany. He walked around the block, sat at the corner cafe, bought an old newspaper at the newsstand, just to have a reason to stand nearby. He listened to the delivery drivers talk about the Ice Queen manager, listened to an old cleaning lady say that she once saw the little girl from the storage room being pushed down but not daring to cry, and listened to Mac, the head mechanic, say that every time he came to the back for parts, he only saw the little girl's hand come out to receive the package, never saw her face. From those fragmented pieces, the name Eleanor Vance was repeated, not because she talked a lot, but because she was the last person to work for Bethany in the detailing department and then suddenly quit. That's when Arthur went to the small, independent auto detailing shop where Eleanor now worked. Not as a millionaire, but just as a man who had seen children being abused in broad daylight and couldn't ignore it. Eleanor Vance worked in a small, cramped shop about 6 blocks away from Apex Motors. She wasn't special, short, her hands rough from stiff cloths and harsh chemicals. But when Arthur mentioned Bethany Croft, she suddenly fell silent. Then she stood up, locked the shop door from the inside, and pulled out a small, faded, fabric-covered notebook from the drawer. "No one believed me when I spoke," she began, her voice strangely calm. "So I wrote it down." In the notebook were lines of steady handwriting, date, time, names of the dealership staff, hours worked, and special notes. Arthur turned to the page that read Lily and Leo T. It appeared 7 times. Next to each line were small, stinging notes. Thin hands. Can't hold sponges. New bruise on Leo's back. Can't sit for long. Lily doesn't speak. Eyes staring at the wall all day. Last time. Blood on Leo's shirt. I gave her a cloth. She hid it, Eleanor said lightly, as if talking about the weather. At first, I thought they were just distant relatives. Then I knew they were Arthur's brother's kids, orphaned. But when I asked Bethany, she said the children were mute. Just strays we tolerate. She looked up at Arthur. But I've never heard anyone mute who knows how to cry so silently. Arthur left the shop with a copied notebook. His hand gripped the steering wheel tightly, but his mind drifted somewhere else. That sentence, crying silently, was like a lock twisting into his chest. He thought of Lily's eyes that weren't wet, weren't red, but always hid something broken. The next person he sought was Mac O'Connell, the head mechanic. He lived in a cramped apartment on the second floor of an old building near the dealership. When he saw Arthur, he was slightly surprised, but didn't refuse to meet. Perhaps because he had been waiting for someone to come for many years. "Those kids," Mac said, his fingers fiddling with a small wrench on his lap. "They only came around for a few weeks officially. Didn't talk, didn't play with anyone, but they'd draw. Drew constantly. But the things they drew, cars without wheels, people without mouths." Arthur was silent. "I reported it to Bethany's office," Mac continued. "Sent 3 notes. All 3 were returned, saying that staff has no right to interfere in company affairs. After that, I was reminded for interfering too much. Lily and Leo, they just stopped appearing openly." A week later, solicitor Evelyn Reed, Arthur's corporate lawyer, appeared with a file in hand. "You guessed right, Arthur," Evelyn said, opening a faded printout. "Bethany Croft never had official guardianship. Your brother, Thomas Hayes, Lily and Leo's father, died in a sudden accident, leaving behind an inheritance of nearly $2 million, tied to a small, independent auto shop and some property. The will didn't specify who would receive it on behalf of the children." "So why didn't anyone check?" Arthur asked. "Because no one wanted to check," Evelyn laughed softly, bitterly. The file was submitted through Bethany's personal broker. The guardianship certificate was an uncertified copy. No one bothered to verify. In the eyes of the law, Lily and Leo are children with a caregiver. That was enough for no one to touch it. Finally, Arthur sought out Jamie Reynolds, the young sales associate. Jamie was initially nervous, but after a few minutes confessed. "They came to the back door, Mr. Hayes, just like every day. I'd leave them a pastry or a sandwich sometimes." He looked down. "Bethany, she said they were loiterers, a nuisance, that it was company policy to not feed them. But they looked so hungry." Jamie's voice dropped. "Last night I heard Lily. She was whispering to a little fabric car. She said, 'In the end, no one's coming to save us, are they?'" Eleanor, Mac, Evelyn, and Jamie had each tried to do something. But each person, each time, had failed because they stood alone. Because what was protecting Bethany's wrongdoing was too big of a system and too little of a heart. Because there were walls that only knew how to keep secrets, but no one was loud enough to break them. Until now. Until they started connecting the fragmented pieces, piecing together from the notebook, the torn pieces of paper, the look in, the storage closet, and even the whispered words from a sales associate. That evening, in Arthur's small private office, where the soft light shone on the old file pages, 4 people sat around a polished wooden table. No lawyers, no police. Just the people who had once been helpless. Evelyn put the file down. "We don't have much time. If Bethany feels she's being watched, she may very well run away. Her corporate deal is tomorrow morning." Arthur nodded. Eleanor held in her hand the photo of the notebook. Mac was silent, his hand gripping the edge of his shirt. Jamie closed, his eyes as if praying. No one said it, but they all knew this was no longer a legal matter. This was a promise, a final promise for children that no one had chosen to stand on their side. For the first time after years of trying alone, they were no longer alone. And hope, for the first time, had a place to begin to sprout. The Service Bay area had been especially quiet these past few days, not because things were more peaceful, but because that silence seemed to be intentionally created by Bethany. She didn't yell as much as before, didn't smash things, didn't use her wrench, but observed Lily and Leo more closely, like a cat watching, a mouse. Not needing to pounce, just sitting there was enough to make the other party not dare to breathe heavily. No dinner, Bethany said when Lily finished polishing the last car window with only a single streak left. You're punished for being slow. Lily hadn't eaten properly for 3 days, but she was used to it. A hungry stomach could cramp up, then it would fade away. But her eyes hadn't been seeing clearly lately. Everything seemed blurred, sticking together in one streak. Even the light from the dim yellow light bulb hanging from the ceiling became blurred. If you sleep, you won't wake up early, Bethany continued, her voice like a saying repeated for many years. As long as you're breathing, you have to work. That's your fate. You hear that? That night, Lily had to polish until 3 in the morning. Each time her head fell to the glass, she was woken up by a loud knock on the storage room door. No one in the dealership heard, or if they did, they didn't want to hear. When the last streak was finished, Lily quietly stood up, walking towards the corner of the room. She didn't sleep, just sat, hugging her knees, resting her chin on her hands as if trying to keep herself from dissolving. The fabric car was still there, the only thing not taken away. Lily hugged it, her hand stroking the worn thread of its blue trim. Dust covered a thin layer on the car. Lily didn't wipe it off. She felt it looked more like her that way. The next morning, when Lily opened the storage door to pick up the trash, she saw a crisp white dollar bill lying on the windowsill. Small, pure, and fragile. Strange, nothing else. No bread, no paper, just money. She looked around. No one outside. No car sounds. No people. Jamie. She was sure it was him. Lily bent down, carefully picked up the bill, hiding it in her pocket. She didn't dare look at it for long, not because she was afraid of being caught, but because she didn't want to hope. Hope makes people weak. But Bethany saw. In the afternoon, when Lily carelessly left her pocket hanging open on the hook, Bethany found it. "Where did this come from?" she asked, the white dollar bill lying in her hand as if it was a dirty object. Lily stood still, not answering. Bethany looked at her for a while, then lowered her hand. Under her heel, she crushed the dollar bill until it was a crumpled mess. Worthless thing. No anger, no shouting, just a calm stomp. But Lily felt like someone was stepping on her own heart. That evening, she couldn't fall asleep. The hunger now was no longer cramping but became something heavy, lying in her chest. Lily sat in the dark, holding the fabric car, whispering very softly to it, as if afraid of hearing herself. In the end, no one's coming to save us, are they? The fabric car didn't answer, but she didn't expect an answer. She just needed someone to hear her, even if it was fabric and thread. On the 3rd consecutive sleepless night, Lily began to hear a buzzing in her ears. She didn't know if it was a real sound or an imagination. Everything seemed to slow down. Her hand held the sponge but couldn't polish the glass. Her fingers bled, but she didn't feel anything. Then suddenly, she screamed. Not because of pain, not because of fear, but because the pressures in her heart had been suppressed for too long. The scream wasn't loud, but it echoed enough to make her dizzy. Lily herself froze, as if not believing it came from her. Bethany woke up from the office outside. "Are you crazy?" she snapped, yelling at this hour. Lily looked at her, her eyes not resentful, not remorseful, just eyes that seemed to be awakened after a long, long sleep. Bethany suddenly fell silent. For the first time, she didn't say anything more. She came closer but didn't raise her hand. She looked at Lily and suddenly saw that something had changed. No longer a look of resignation and not of opposition, but a threatening emptiness. As if this child was about to no longer be a child, about to no longer be the obedient little girl she could control. When Bethany left, Lily collapsed to the floor. No more tears and no more anger, just a void that had just opened in her heart. A void wide enough for something to creep in. Not hope, but the need to live. to step out of this storage room, out of the doors that are always locked, out of the shadow of the woman who sees her as property. Lily didn't know what that was called. She only knew that she had just heard her own voice for the first time in many months. Outside, the wind blew through the crack in the door, carrying with it a crumpled dollar bill. It rolled into a corner of the wall, lay there distorted, but not yet dissolved. The evening breeze blew through the service bay, making the warped metal door creak like a groan. Arthur stood in front of the back entrance to the old garage, holding a stack of documents and a legitimate reason to knock on the door. "We are conducting routine safety checks," he said, looking directly at Bethany, who had just opened the docker less than a third of her face. "There's nothing to check," she replied coldly. "My property is fine. Nothing is broken." "We need to confirm to ensure proper procedure. All company properties must be checked in this round." Bethany laughed, dryly. "You think I don't know what you're doing?" Arthur was silent, not denying, not retreating. In the brief silence between the two, Lily stood behind the thin curtain, quietly looking out. No one knew she was there, but she saw everything clearly. The man's eyes, calm but determined, and Bethany's hand clenching the doorknob as if about to break it. "Go away," Bethany said, her voice dry. "If you don't have a warrant, I won't open the door." Then she slammed it shut. The sound of the bolt locking was heavy, like an ending. Outside, Arthur slowly walked out into the alleyway, stopping under the shade of a delivery truck. In his pocket was a copy of the file Evelyn had just completed that morning, with full legal basis for a lawsuit, except for one thing: the confirmation from Lily and Leo themselves. "We have everything," Evelyn said as she put the file on Arthur's office table, except for the children's voice. "The children don't speak," Arthur replied, his eyes staring into the distance, "or has never been allowed to speak." In the small storage room, Lily held her fabric car, quietly opening the seam in the back, where she had once hidden the first piece of paper. The words that had survived from the comic book. "You deserve to be loved." Next to that piece of paper today, she stuffed another piece, smaller, written in her own trembling handwriting. "If anyone finds this, I don't want to go anywhere. I don't want to go with her. I want to stay." After writing, her hands trembled, not because she was afraid of being discovered, but because for the first time she wrote something so clear. Not vague, not imagined, but the truth. And the truth is sometimes more frightening than silence. That same afternoon, Jamie, the sales associate, left a small bag of pastries, as always. But this time, inside, there was also a piece of paper folded in quarters. Lily picked it up without letting anyone see. She opened the paper in the corner of the room, where the light from the vent fell enough to read child's writing, but neat. "I know you're not invisible. I see you every day. If you can't speak, then I'll speak for you." No signature, but she knew only Jamie would write that. Lily put the piece of paper on her palm. She didn't cry, but her chest throbbed with each light beat. Not like pain, but like when someone first touches a scab, a vague feeling between injury and revival. She turned the piece of paper over, wrote "Thank you" with a blunt pencil, then hid it under a loose floorboard near the vent, where she knew Jamie often left things. That night, Lily didn't sleep. She hugged the fabric car sitting in the corner of their makeshift bed, her eyes wide open in the dark, not waiting for anyone, not hoping anyone would come, but in her heart, there was a small movement, like when she saw a seed sprout in a clear glass of water, even though no one believed it could live. For the first time in a long time, she imagined herself being saved. Not like a dream, not flying away, not someone hugging her and running away from this place, but as simple as being taken by the hand and led across a threshold, and then someone saying, "Let's go home." She had never heard anyone say that, but she thought if someone said it, that would be the person she would believe. She sat for a long time, her fingers tracing the thread of the fabric car, imagining. Another hand, not the hand that gripped her collar and dragged her away, but the hand that was warm enough to hold when she let go. If I leave this place, who will call my name first? Lily thought. She had never been called by name with affection. She wanted that. Not big, not bustling, just someone remember her name. Not call her the girl, not call her it, but call her Lily. Bethany paced around her office, unable to sleep. She felt something was wrong, a feeling of being watched, surrounded. But no one knocked on the door again, no letters, no police. She looked at Lily and Leo. The children were sitting quietly by their bed, their eyes not closed, and suddenly saw them differently. Not oppositional, not defiant, but disturbingly still. She didn't know that in that darkness, Lily was no longer afraid. She had tasted a morsel of something called someone on the other side, and a child who knows that she has someone on the other side of the door will not be silent forever. Light footsteps sounded in the hallway outside. Someone passed by, not stopping, but for Lily those footsteps were a signal. Not Bethany's footsteps, not the sound of threats, but the sound of a person, real, existing outside her world. And those footsteps, as thin as the sound of paper rustling in the middle of the night, had sown a very small seed. It wasn't enough to bloom into belief, but enough to let her know she wasn't being completely swallowed up by this place. There was a way out, even if she couldn't see it, even if it was just a faint crack of light at the base of the wall. Bethany didn't say a word throughout the afternoon. She went in and out, cleaning her office closet, flipping the couch cushions, collecting the last valuable items left. A tarnished silver bracelet, an old perfume bottle, a few old photos of her late husband, yellowed. She didn't shed tears. She just wrapped them up carefully like someone who had survived dozens of escapes. Lily and Leo weren't asked anything. They didn't dare, but the atmosphere in the dealership that day was unlike any other day before. No more cursing, no more sounds of the wrench hitting the table, just a prolonged silence, like the wind before a storm. In the evening, Bethany brought back 2 new sets of clothes, cheap but without any signs of wear. She gave one set to Lily, ordering, "Change into it." Lily took the unfamiliar clothes. The khaki jumpsuit was shorter than any dress she had ever worn. The shirt had a zipper and a hood. She didn't understand, but still followed the order. After that, Bethany dragged her into the employee bathroom, sat her down on a chair, and pulled out the dull iron scissors from the cabinet. She cut her hair, without warning. Bethany cut her hair with impatient strokes of the scissors. Hair fell in clumps to the floor. A lock caught on Lily's shoulder. She didn't brush it off, looking at herself in the mirror. She saw a strange face with a bare forehead and eyes no longer hidden. "No one will recognize you," Bethany muttered behind her. Lily still didn't react, but a question popped up in her head. If no one recognizes me anymore, then who will look for me? Late at night, Lily was woken up by a violent tug. "Take your things," Bethany ordered. "We're leaving." Lily didn't ask where. Bethany didn't say. Lily only saw her bring a big bag with some papers and a strange passport, a different name, a photo cut from somewhere and pasted on. Lily didn't sleep all night. While Bethany was busy packing, Lily sat in the dark, holding a small piece of paper, writing quickly, "If anyone asks, I'm not going with her. I don't agree." She folded the piece of paper very small, sewing it hidden into the hem of her new shirt with blue thread, the very thread she had used to make trim for the fabric car. A hired car carried them through the empty streets towards the international airport. Lily sat in the back seat, not speaking. Outside, streetlights swept across her face in short bursts. Light then dark, like a slow-motion film. At a red light intersection, A school bus passed by. On the bus, children waved, shouting to each other through the glass. Lily looked, not blinking. She wasn't jealous, not sad. She just quietly touched the hem of her shirt, as if to check the piece of paper was still there, and her decision had not been taken away. Bethany gasped, checking her watch. "Go faster," she urged the driver. "The last flight is at 10:15. When they arrived at the airport, she pulled Lily and Leo out of the car, walking very fast. Not much luggage, just a backpack and an old paper bag. Lily didn't resist, but she was no longer the child being dragged aimlessly. She was counting each step, not to run away, but to wait for the right moment. In her head, the image of Arthur appeared, like a stake tied to the edge of a cliff. She didn't know his name, had no information about him, but she knew he was the first person to stop when he saw her being abused, and someone like that surely wouldn't turn away when she needed him. She had seen him through the crack in the curtains, only fleetingly, but that look was enough for her to believe he wasn't like the others, not asking if she was okay, not hastily promising anything. He just stood there, not turning away. And for Lily, standing still in a world where everyone leaves was an act with a weight equal to love. At the airport, the white lights were as bright as day. Announcements were constant. People dragged suitcases hurriedly. Bethany squeezed Lily's hand tighter every time she slowed down. Bethany pulled her hard. Lily didn't react. She just turned her head, looking around. Lily stood next to Bethany near the ticket check area. Her hand was being held tightly, the knuckles turning purple under the pressure. Under the cold, fluorescent light, she looked up. The electronic board flashed red letters. Departures. There was no one for her to wave goodbye to, no one waiting for her at the destination. And if she got on this flight, maybe no one would ever see her again. Bethany pulled hard. "Go," she said quietly through gritted teeth. Lily followed, but each step was a distance closer to disappearing completely. The line was silently queuing in front of security. Lily tried not to shake, but her hands were no longer her own. A strange feeling, as if her body was being controlled by someone else, a puppet being led through each knot. Her eyes scanned around, not searching for a familiar face, just hoping some eyes would know who she was. In her pocket, the hem of the paper she was hiding remained still, rubbing lightly against her hand each time she moved. The paper has never been read, but she knows the content of each letter. They are the only resistance she has before everything belongs to others. Bethany jerked her hand one more time as the loudspeaker rang. "Passengers on Flight 2215 to Mexico City, please proceed to Gate 14. The sound was like a starting gun. Lily was pushed towards the security gate. A uniformed person checked the papers. Bethany handed over a passport. Fake, Lily knew. The name on it wasn't hers. The picture wasn't her, but people don't know. People won't ask. A second before passing through the scanner, Lily stopped. She couldn't hear anything anymore. All the sounds were strangled, as if in water. The crowd blurred. Her eyes flickered, but only one thing remained clear: the hem of the shirt where the paper was hidden. She reached out to grasp it. "Go!" Bethany snapped louder. She leaned down and whispered, "If you don't go, you're dead to me." But Lily wasn't afraid anymore. A hot flash spread up her chest, ran through her throat, touched the vocal cords that had been silenced for too long. She didn't know where she got the breath from, just knew that if she didn't speak now, she would never hear her voice again. And then, "I don't want to go with her!" The scream rang out. Not loud, not sharp, but clear, decisive, like a knife, cutting in half the invisible string that had bound her for so many years. A moment of silence enveloped. Then everything stirred. The people in front turned around. The security guard was stunned. An old woman pulling a suitcase stopped in midair, agape at the short-haired girl standing tremblingly next to a stern-faced woman. Lily stood straight, her hand still grasping the hem of her shirt, not running away, not retracting her words. An airport employee approached, his voice low but resolute. "What's going on here?" Bethany was about to answer when Arthur stepped out of the crowd. No introduction was needed, no names, just him standing there, tall, calm, his eyes not leaving Lily. And for the first time, the girl stepped towards him, not waiting for anyone to call, not asking if she was allowed, just stepping forward step by step, as if taking herself out of hell. Evelyn followed closely behind, handing the file to the airport employee. A few minutes later, 2 more people from internal security showed up. Bethany was asked to produce papers. She flustered, still yelling that Lily is my child, that she's just panicked, that she's sick. But no one believed her anymore, because the child had spoken, and that voice was real. Lily stood next to Arthur. He didn't touch her, didn't say, "Well done," didn't comfort her. He just stood, letting her know she was no longer alone. She looked up at him. Arthur nodded slightly. There was no need to say anything. That nod was the final confirmation. "I see you now. From now on, no one will make you disappear again." A female employee took Lily to a spare chair, pouring water. She didn't drink. She just sat there looking at her hands, her fingers shaking, but no longer purple. Shaking with release, with crossing the threshold, because she had just broken the cage that no one saw, but she had been in for so many years. When the police arrived, Bethany was no longer yelling. She just sat down on the bench, her face pale. She didn't look up at Lily once more. She knew the only thing that had kept her safe before was the silence of that girl. And now, when that voice rang out, she had nothing left. On the way out of the airport, Lily turned back. The people who had been standing there were still looking at her, not pitying, not curious, but as if they had just seen something very real, very old, very much in need of protection. She took Arthur's hand, not being dragged, but voluntarily following. For the first time, she left a place without feeling like she was being left behind. Lily and Leo's new home was at the end of a tree-lined street, far from the city center. The house wasn't big, but had a small garden in the back, windows facing the morning light, and especially no locks in the bedrooms. Arthur intentionally left it that way. The day Lily and Leo were brought here, he didn't ask her if she was afraid, didn't suggest what she should call him, he just said softly, as the wind brushed through her newly regrown hair. "Here, you don't need to do anything to be at peace." The first week, Lily didn't say much. She slept close to the edge of the bed, not daring to lie in the middle, even though the mattress was very soft. The pillow smelled of soap. She still lay on her side, like in the old storage room, as if ready to roll off the bed if someone walked in. Some nights, Lily woke up in the middle of the night. The window wasn't closed tight. The wind blew, making the curtains flutter. She, startled, shrinking, listening to every sound. A small click in the kitchen. Just the water bottle expanding from the cold, but she couldn't fall back to sleep. She pulled the blanket over her head, leaving only a small gap to breathe, like she used to do whenever she was afraid of Bethany opening the door unexpectedly. Each morning, Arthur left a glass of warm milk and a small piece of bread on the dining table, not calling, not waiting. If she didn't touch it, he didn't ask why. The kitchen light was always on all night. She didn't know he did it on purpose. But on the third night, Lily first tiptoed down to the kitchen, sitting and stealing a leftover cookie, still according to old habits, eating slowly, cautiously, her hands hugging her body. The next morning on the dining table was a small piece of paper neatly written. "If you're hungry, eat any time. No one keeps records here." That lunchtime, Lily smiled for the first time, even if it was just a pursed lip when she saw the piece of bread with a small toothpick stuck in it, like a candle. Arthur pretended not to see, but in his heart, a silent joy arose. That pursed lip, for him, was more radiant than any laughter. There was a wardrobe in Lily's room. The wardrobe was white with round porcelain knobs, stickers of small stars. But for many days, she didn't touch it, just looked from afar. Every time she passed by, she felt her heart beat fast, as if just opening it, something would burst out, forcing her to pay the price for the good things she had. Arthur never touched the wardrobe. He left it there as if understanding that the wardrobe door would only be opened when she was ready, not sooner, not later. One sunny morning, Lily found a box of crayons in the drawer. The metal box was worn at the corners, the lid a bit sticky, but inside there were enough colors. She sat by the window, starting to draw. The first picture was streaks of color. The second picture had a sky. By the third picture, she drew the entrance to Apex Motors, but no cars, just a man standing by the light board, his hands in his pockets, looking into the distance. At first, she hid the paintings under the mattress, afraid that someone would see them and punish her. But then, when she finished drawing the man standing, waiting at the dealership, she put the picture on the table. Not asking permission, not hiding, just putting it there like a first word she dared to say in color. The painting wasn't signed, but when Arthur saw it being put on the wall, he just nodded, not asking, not commenting. He understood, because sometimes silence is the first language of trust. Lily started writing letters. Not long, just a few lines, written to Jamie. She didn't send them because she wasn't sure if her friend was still at the old dealership, but each time she finished writing, she felt a little lighter. I think the light doesn't hate me. Before I thought I was being punished, so I was in the dark. But now I know the light is still there. I just haven't dared to come out yet. One afternoon, Lily went for a walk with Arthur to the small stream behind the house. The water flowed slowly past the rocks. The grass on the bank swayed gently in the wind. She carried a small wooden box, not telling him what was inside. When they reached the log bridge across the stream, Lily stopped. Her hand trembled as she opened the lid. Inside was the old fabric car, the one she used to hug every night in the storage room without a window. She touched it one last time, stroking the worn threads that had faded, then gently dropped it into the water. The fabric car floated on the surface for a moment, spinning a few times as if waving goodbye, then floated away, disappearing after the small bend. Arthur didn't ask what it was. Lily didn't need to say who it was. But in her eyes, for the first time, there was a space that had been cleaned, no longer the shadow of fear, no longer the breath of the controller. The trial of Bethany Croft took place on a March morning in a small room of the local courthouse. Outside, the cold wind blew through the old wooden benches. Inside, no one spoke loudly. Even the chairs were pulled lightly, as if everyone knew that silence at this time was more important than outrage. Lily was present at her own request. No one forced her to come. Arthur even wanted to hide her from the trial so she wouldn't have to witness anything uglier again. But Lily said in a decisive tone that he had never heard from her, "I want to know how much she will lie." And he understood this wasn't for revenge, but to close. Bethany entered with her hands cuffed in front of her stomach. She didn't mope, didn't cry, didn't bow her head. She just stood straight, as if attending a meeting. When asked, she answered in a steady voice, as if recording, "I took care of them from a young age. No one helped. No one thanked me. They didn't need to go to school. They could learn at the dealership, too. I was just holding the money for them. I would give it back when they were old enough. We were preparing to go abroad because the environment was better. I didn't do anything wrong." Not once in her testimony did she call Lily or Leo by name, just it, the children. That nuisance. Lily sat in the last seat. She didn't cry, didn't shrink, didn't cover her face like in the old days. She just looked straight at the woman, standing in front of the dock. Her eyes had no resentment and not a look of victory. It was silent, but decisive, as the last door was closed, never to be opened again. Beside her, Arthur sat still, but his hand rested on Lily's thigh, warm and steady. When the court allowed the victim to submit a personal letter instead of direct testimony, Lily stepped up. She didn't speak, just handed over the small envelope in which was the piece of paper she had hidden in her shirt. If anyone asks, I'm not going with her. I don't agree. The judge read it aloud. The voice was not high, not dramatic, but in the courtroom, everyone seemed to stop breathing. It was no longer ink on paper, but a living testament to the fact that children had screamed in silence. In the final arguments, Lawyer Evelyn gently turned her head, looking at Lily. Then she said, "Sometimes the most terrible thing is not the action, but the fact that a person can do all those things without feeling it's wrong." The sentence was pronounced 8 years in prison, no parole, along with a commitment to invalidate all financial rights related to Lily and Leo's inheritance. Bethany didn't yell, didn't protest. She just smirked, like smiling or like sneering. Lily watched her being escorted out of the room. For a very short moment, their eyes met. Lily didn't bow her head. When it was all over, Lily stepped out into the courthouse yard, where the sun had begun to rise. Arthur quietly handed her a bottle of water. She opened the lid, took a sip. The wind blew through her shoulders, but for the first time, she didn't. "Feel cold. Are you okay?" he asked. Lily nodded. Not nodding just to get it over with, but nodding to say that what needed to be faced, she had looked straight at it. That evening, when she got home, she opened the wardrobe. Nothing happened. No one walked in, no screaming, just a gentle fragrance of new fabric and a row of neatly folded clothes. Lily tried on one, then stood in front of the mirror. She looked at herself for a long time, not to check if she was beautiful or not, but to check if this was real. She reached out to touch her face, not to wipe away tears because she wasn't crying, but to feel this skin, this face, this hair that was growing back. All were still here, and she was still a person, not an object to be hidden. At dinner that day, Lily sat at the table before the kitchen lights were turned on. She picked up vegetables, ate rice, drank water. Not secretly, not awkwardly, not startled when Arthur got up to get salt. When he returned to the table, Lily was still sitting there, straight back, hands on the table. A very small moment, but for Arthur, it was the biggest answer to everything he had never asked. The bright yellow school bus slowly crossed the red dirt road. On both sides were fields of wheat that had just been harvested. On the bus, chatter was rife, interspersed with intermittent laughter. The children were excited for their first picnic after the spring break. Lily sat near the window holding a worn beige backpack, her eyes looking outside. Her short hair had grown evenly. Her skin was tanned. Her face was thin but without the panic as before. On her wrist was a string tied from embroidery thread, light purple. Jamie had woven it for her this morning. "Good. Luck for your first day away," Jamie had said that, then secretly slipped into her hand a drawing. 2 houses, one big, one small, connected by a winding road. Below, her friend wrote in soft pencil, "We all have a home." Lily didn't answer. She just smiled lightly and truly. She folded the drawing, put it in her pocket, touched it one more time before getting on the bus. "We all have a home." That sentence made her confused, because before she thought home was a place to hide, but now she found herself wanting to come back, not because she was forced, but because she knew there would be someone waiting. The trip wasn't long. The school chose a picnic area in the suburbs with a lawn, a small playground, and a few ancient trees providing shade. The children divided into groups to play sports: tug-of-war, tag, ring toss. Lily chose the ring toss game. At first she threw crooked. The children burst out laughing. She wasn't angry, also didn't retreat. On the third try, the plastic ring fell right on the top of the pole, and a round of applause rang out. Someone shouted, "Hit it, Lily!" Lily smiled a real smile, not wary, not afraid, not looking around to see who was watching her. When the children ran towards the dining table, Jamie took her hand. "You throw better than last time." Lily didn't answer, just bowed her head, but her fingers didn't let go. That handshake, for the first time in a long time, wasn't squeezing, wasn't pulling, but was holding back. In the distance, Eleanor Vance stood by the row of trees, holding a scorebook. She had applied to transfer back to Apex Motors as a consultant for Arthur's new foundation, and today was the first day she returned in the role of observer. When she saw Lily hit the ring, she startled, not because of the throw, but because that smile shining like the sun breaking on the water, a smile that she thought would never be on that face again. Eleanor turned away. Tears fell on her wrist, not because of sadness, but because in the end, that child had not been swallowed. At lunchtime, Lily sat next to Jamie under a tree. The lunchbox she brought had peanut butter sandwiches, a few slices of apple, and a paper carton of milk. Arthur told her that she could change the dish if she didn't like it, but today she ate it all. Not because she was hungry, but because she no longer had to hide food for tomorrow. When the picnic ended, the children got on the bus one by one. The moans of "too soon" rang out, but none of the children were angry for long, just a lollipop or a new joke, and they had already forgotten. Lily sat next to the window like when she came, but this time she didn't look far away. She looked towards the school gate, where the bus would stop in a few minutes. She looked down at her new sneakers, the kind with laces. She still didn't know how to tie them tightly. Arthur had to help in the morning, but he said, "It's okay, you just practice today." She tied them herself, a little crooked, a little loose, but they were her own. The bus stopped in front of the gate. The teacher went around, reminding the children to check their belongings, clothes, socks, then asked each of them, "Who's picking you up?" to avoid confusing people. When she reached Lily, she asked quietly, in a soft voice, no different from how she asked the other children, "Lily, who's picking you up this afternoon?" She thought Lily would hesitate, thought she would point, thought she would bow her head, but Lily looked up, her eyes bright in the afternoon sun. Her face was not timid and not too tough, just a 7-year-old girl, normal, as she should always have been. And she replied in a clear, steady voice, "My uncle is waiting for me at the gate." No one asked more. No one needed to explain. The man standing on the other side of the fence, his hair salt and pepper, his jacket dark, holding a bottle of water, didn't need papers to prove his role, because Lily had called. And calling is choosing. Eleanor stood behind her, hand lightly, gripping the back of the seat. She didn't push forward, didn't come closer, just looked like she used to look at Lily through the storage room window in the old days. Jamie waved when Lily got off. Lily waved back, but her eyes didn't leave that familiar shape, the shape that had been waiting, not urging, not impatient, as if he had always been standing there, just waiting for her to be ready. When Lily stepped out of the gate, Arthur held out his hand, not hugging, not carrying, just holding out his hand like a father holding out his hand to welcome his child home. And Lily, without hesitation, put her hand in his, holding his hand. She didn't think about the trip and didn't remember the old dealership. She just thought, now it's afternoon, and someone has been waiting for me. The waiting was not a reward, but an affirmation that she was worth someone waiting for. Everything had started again, not with a sentence, not with a triumphal trumpet, but with a small call, light, but big enough to end a journey full of darkness. My uncle is waiting for me at the gate. The story of Lily, Arthur, and the silent people like Eleanor, Mac, and Jamie is not a story about a magnificent rescue. It is a reminder that sometimes to change the life of a child, you don't need a miracle, just a long enough look, a deep enough question, and a person who refuses to turn away. And if you, the one who has patiently read to this line, have ever felt like you were forgotten, ever wanted to scream but no one heard, or ever thought that your voice wasn't loud enough for anyone to listen, please remember that as long as there is one person who believes you have value, then you are not invisible. Thank you for staying. I hope you leave with something left in your heart, not pain, but tenderness. Because sometimes, the most beautiful thing is not to be seen, but to be seen through and still be loved.